On January 15th, 1990, Waveland Beach in Port St. Lucie, Florida was virtually deserted. But strong winds and serious riptides led lifeguard Mike Senek to raise a yellow flag, warning any beachgoers to swim with caution.
The surf condition that day was approximately 3 to 4 foot surf with an extreme rip current running from north to south. To the untrained eye, it's not going to be obvious.
About 4:15 p.m., 2 vacationers from Baltimore arrived at the beach.
Martha decided she would go into the water. She's a very strong swimmer. Now, I didn't go in because I didn't like the looks of the waves myself. I love to look at it. I love to sit there. But I don't like to go in unless there are practically no waves.
Be careful.
65-year-old Martha Beckley was an avid swimmer. At home, she swam every week. While Martha swam, her friend watched from the shore. Around 5 p.m., Mike Senek closed his lifeguard station and went home.
We're supposed to lower the flag so that people are aware that there is no guard, and then we secure our lifeguard tower and leave the beach. I was completely unaware of what situation was getting ready to happen.
I went up on the steps because I saw some other people there, and I was talking to them to pass the time away, but keeping an eye on Martha.
Are you a patient? Yes.
I had seen her several times waving at me, and I thought that that signal meant I'm having a good time. Why don't you come out and join me? I realized there was nobody on the beach and that Martha was the only person in the water. I wished she would come in. Finally, I think she got to the sandbar and she waved to me and she said, "I need help."
I'll get some help. I get help. Miss!
There was a lady watching, and I asked her to be sure to stay there to keep an eye on Martha. I definitely didn't want to leave Martha alone in the water, but I had to leave her to get some help.
She went to the nearest building.
It didn't seem as if there was anybody in there. I thought perhaps it was deserted. But I saw a man and shouted at him that there was a lady in the water who needed help.
The condo resident ran to the building's office and told Dave O'Hanna, president of the condominium association, that a woman was drowning. Dave immediately called 911.
911.
The call for help came in at 5:23 p.m.
And she's in the ocean. We'll get the ambulance and sheriff's department on the way.
An ambulance was immediately dispatched to the scene.
Our maintenance guy, Bill Johns, was there helping Bud Williams, the mover. And I shouted, "I've called 911. It was at that moment that Bud started to run down to the beach, and he didn't hesitate for one moment. He ran off the dune walk down to the beach, took up his shoes and his shirt and jumped in without looking back. It was after that that I spotted another swimmer coming from the north.
Together, Bud and the other man managed to keep an exhausted Martha's head above water. But they, too, were caught in a strong riptide that was carrying them all out to sea.
It's a terrible feeling of frustration to not be able to help somebody. I was concerned that they weren't going to last until the rescue people got here.
Two EMTs and paramedic Tim Munson had responded to the 911 call.
She advised us that her friend had been in the water about an hour and a half. John Paul Broman, being a surfer, was certainly the best swimmer of the three of us. So I asked if he had any problem with going out. And from there, he just went ahead and was in the water.
Okay, Andy, he's going to get another one.
We called our central dispatch by radio and advised them that we were going to need a boat because the water current was too strong. It was still obvious that with three people out there, someone else was going to have to go out.
The Coast Guard was contacted, but their nearest cutter was 20 miles away.
My perception was that the paramedics were in trouble, too. And I knew if they had to depend upon that Coast Guard cutter to get here, you can forget it, because I know how long it takes to get here from Fort Pierce, especially in those kind of seas.
John Paul was all the way out to the three people before I even got into the water. And that's partly because of that riptide. The current actually took him out to them.
The ocean can be very unforgiving at times. A lot of people don't realize what they're getting into. When you get out to a victim, you want to stay away from them. Because when somebody's panicked in the water, and they're going to push anything they can down to stay up, which if they got a hold of you would be you. I told them just to keep kicking while they were floating on the buoy and just to try and help me get in. Bud said he had been moving all day, and he was very tired. He was scared. He had some fright in his eyes. She was just wore out because it had been such a long time.
Though Tim Munson had helped one man to shore, John Paul was still struggling.
It was difficult to try and swim two people in, more than I imagined it would be.
EMT Andrew Sampson also headed into the rough surf.
Even at that point, I felt the strength of the current. I wouldn't normally go out in these conditions and swim. I gave Bud Williams both the buoy and the life ring. He gladly accepted that. We started swimming. We gained 10 feet and then lose about 8 feet. It didn't at first seem like we were making any ground at all.
A good way to get out of one of these is to swim at an angle at the beach, and then sooner or later you'll end up getting out of the rip currents.
One hour and 40 minutes after Martha first went in the water, she and her rescuers, including Bud, made it back to shore.
I didn't anticipate they would get them in. It was more the intent to keep them above the water until the boat arrived. Andy and John Paul, by going south with the current, were able to get to an area where the riptide wasn't as bad, and so the boat wasn't necessary. The patients were both completely exhausted. We had to essentially carry her out of the water.
It was a day Bud Williams would not soon forget.
I was taking everything I had to hang on, and her too. This wasn't my time then. I'm thankful for that. But, if the situation ever come up, I'd do it again. I was going to try to save her if it took my own life, too. I'd have stayed right there to the end with her.
We need something to wrap around her.
I evaluated Martha real quick. Her pulse was good and strong. She was very cold to the core. My two partners were obviously tired. They had seen enough of the water for that day, I'm sure.
Are we ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, let's go.
Martha was taken to the hospital, where water was removed from her lungs, and she was treated for a mild case of hypothermia.
Go up. 1, 3. 1, 2, 3.
They never found the mysterious other man who came to her aid, then disappeared. Martha will always hold a special place in her heart for all the men who risked their lives to save her.
I don't have words to express how thankful I am. I'm just glad that I'm alive.
Yeah. You'll have some regular water, no seawater this time, right?
I don't like salt water. I just drank it because it was there.
There's no way that I could have spent an hour and a half in that water. She's definitely a strong swimmer and a strong woman. I couldn't have done what she did. There's no question about that.
I'm ready to go swimming again anytime I get a chance, but I wouldn't go in the water alone anymore. I would be sure that there would be other people in the water with me. There was a number of times when I said, I think I really am going to drown. I kept saying, you mustn't think that way. You must keep trying. And I did.
Next,